Although the January 6th committee hearings have been delayed, they will not be going on as scheduled tomorrow because of the hurricane. That doesn't mean that we don't have new tidbits of information about what happened in the run-up and aftermath of January 6th, including more text messages that have been released. In particular, we're gonna focus on text messages between Mark Meadows, of course, who was at that point in the very close and influential Trump circle, as well as Phil Waldron, a retired Army colonel who was apparently also an early proponent of 2020 election conspiracy theories. He texted Meadows back on December 23rd, so this is in advance of the insurrection. He talked to him about delay tactics and even sent Meadows a PowerPoint presentation titled "Options for 6 January." So one of the things they were focusing on that had to do with those delay tactics was talking about this judge who had dismissed a lawsuit that was brought by pro-Trump legislators demanding that voting machines be turned over. So Waldron texted Meadows that the decision removed, quote, "our lead domino we were counting on to start the cascade of rulings in other states," to which Meadows replied, "pathetic," which might be a justified criticism of Waldron, but I think in this case, contextually, he's talking about what the judge did. So what they wanted was they wanted to get access to these voting machines to, if we're being charitable, find voter fraud that didn't exist, that there was no evidence of, or plant the evidence, or God knows what, or just use the fact that they have them as a pretext to delay to stop the certification from going forward as demanded by the Constitution. But it wasn't just those text messages. He also allegedly drafted an executive order for the White House instructing the seizure of voting machines, but the order never came to fruition, in part because it's obviously illegal and you can't do that. So Waldron also communicated to Meadows that he had allegedly reviewed troves of suspect electoral data constituting what he described as a Southern steal, which they don't like, I guess, unlike the Southern strategy, which they were big fans of for half a century. And so this is a guy who's a nut job, who wants to steal the election, who wants to use these flimsy pretexts in one state to influence judicial rulings in other states to create enough of a cloud of smoke that on the federal level, they could end the entire thing. They could come up with their fake slates of electors, or they could just not do the certification, whatever it is that would allow them to stop the election from going forward as it's mandated by law and the Constitution to do. And so we have other text messages we're gonna dive into. Waldron is just one of those, but bear in mind, he's not just texting Roger Stone or Matt Gaetz or whatever, it's Mark Meadows. If there was a point of contact to Trump at this point, it would be Mark Meadows, and that's who he was repeatedly reaching out to.
Yeah, so in this case, another one that's very simple. They're talking about tapping into voting machines that they have no right to have access to. And guys, you can tell who's right or wrong easily. Just flip the roles. I know, right wing, you're never gonna do it. You don't care to be fair, you don't care about logic, you don't care about anything, right? But if you did, if you're like the 7 remaining Republicans who are actually mean well in the world and they're like, what's going on? Okay, here, let me address you. If you said the roles are reversed, hey, Biden's team would like to tap into these voting machines while no one's looking, yes? You're gonna go, no way. Or that's how they're gonna steal it. Exactly, that's what we're saying. If you said, hey, Bart, in case he lost, Biden had a set of fake electors that they were gonna go and they were gonna have the blue state say no, or the purple state say, no. We don't care that Trump got more votes and we have no evidence and we went to court 60 times and every Biden appointed judge or Obama appointed judge said you have zero evidence. We don't care. We like Biden should be president, so he has fake electors who's gonna make that happen for him. And he's texting with his chief of staff, Ron Klain. There's all these, Podesta and other guys are texting with him and say, oh yeah, when do we put in the fake electors? When do we tap into the voting machines? What would be your reaction? Oh my God, I knew it! Stop the steal! That's what you guys did. Okay, that's what you did. If you want to deny every fact in the world, okay, have at it, Hoss. Just be careful with gravity. That one's a little tricky.
Exactly. Yeah, and in this case, we have this long list of little things that could have gone the other way that if enough of them had gone the other way, it might have changed the outcome of the election, not the outcome of the vote. That was clear, Biden won, but it could change the outcome for America from a democracy to something else, whatever it is that's lurking in the perhaps not too distant future. So if they had seized the machines, what could they have done? I honestly don't even know. I don't know what it would be possible to do. I know what they wouldn't find on them, which is actual evidence of voter fraud, let alone enough voter fraud to change the results of Arizona's election or multiple states. Because again, remember, like they would focus on Arizona or they would focus on Georgia, but they needed to flip 4 of them for Trump to win. They weren't gonna find that. And they know that they weren't going to find that. But maybe they could find something. Maybe they could find a pretext to end democracy. As Cenk said in an earlier segment, there are always going to be people like this in a democracy. But the test of a democracy is, can they be put in positions where they can make the difference? Or are there enough good people, good rules, good laws to stop them from simply replacing the will of the people with whatever it is that they want?
So John, in the case of Arizona, we don't have to have a hypothetical. They wanted this group eventually called Cyber Ninjas to go in and look at that voting machine. Good news for them. Arizona allowed them to do it in a way where they weren't doing it on their own, but apparently theoretically in a safe environment where they wouldn't be able to mess with the votes. And guess what they found? No voter fraud at all. The election was exactly right and Biden had won. That's their guys. That's their guys. The right-wing cyber ninja guys were like, oh, God damn it, it turns out Biden had won.
If I recall correctly, they got attacked by other right-wingers for announcing
Of course,
that.
instantly, because they're like, why? Because the right-wing doesn't want to know the truth. Oh my God, right-wing voters hate the truth. If anyone dares them tell the truth, they're like, oh my God, how do we shut that guy up? Should we do violence? It makes them viscerally uncomfortable to hear anything that's true.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's a rock solid fact. There's no question about it because they did it and they said, yeah, oops, right? But it was only the Cyber Ninja guys who and all the people who had done that technically that said, oh yeah, Biden won. But that didn't permeate to anyone else. And I want you guys to think about this too. Isn't it amazing that all the people who said there was definitely the election was stolen by Biden against Trump, right? After seeing the Arizona recount and every other recount, including 3 recounts in Georgia, including a hand recount, that not one of them changed their mind? Like if somebody had told me that, hey, Bernie Sanders got an election stolen from him by Biden, I'd be like, okay, what evidence do you have? And they said nothing. I'd be like, oh, well, that kind of ruins your argument, doesn't it? They're like, no, it doesn't. Let's just say that Bernie won the election. I'd be like, no, a hard pass. That's nuts. They're like, yeah, I know, but we went to court 60 times and we lost every case. How's that a but? Okay, I know, but we looked at the Arizona results and it turns out we were totally wrong. How is that a but, right? But for the right wing, not one of them has changed their minds. Isn't that amazing?
Not a single but. Not a single one. Yeah, and by the way, like in my experience, and I haven't been covering this as long as you, every election is going to end with some percentage of the losing candidate's supporters refusing to accept the result and implying that it was stolen, regardless of evidence. Doesn't mean that elections can't be stolen, but there will always be some percent. The thing with Trump, though, is that it's a massive, massive percent that he was personally stoking and continues to this day. He might be bleeding about it right now on Truth Social, and that it doesn't matter how many years go by, their belief in it only strengthens over time. That's what makes this so amazing in comparison to other cases. I do want to just mention one other thing before we move on, which is unfortunately we are not going to have the hearings tomorrow with the hurricane, approaching the East Coast. But when it does come, remember, we might well hear from Ginny Thomas, and Ginny Thomas was also one of those who was texting Mark Meadows. And so, were there other communications? Are there things we don't know about? Clarence Thomas, is he potentially involved? That's one of the things that I would really hope that we would get some clarity on. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to wait at least a week, if not longer.
Yeah, here's my clarity. They did it.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.